me and he told me, he said, young man, you better realize that you're on this earth tonight for a purpose. The only reason you're still alive is that God has a purpose for you. If not, you don't live through things like that. People without purpose, if you didn't have a purpose, then this night would have been your night. So you need to realize that. I said, this old man's out of his mind. You know, if God had been looking for me, he had the opportunity to get me a long time ago. So don't tell me about that God stuff now. And that's what you have. You have an imperfect book that is only perfected through faith. This is exactly what he told me, that this book is perfected through faith. You cannot perfect it textually. It's not a textually perfect book. Those who believe in it by faith. And so I said, here we go again with this faith thing. You know, I said, God gave me a brain for a reason. If he did not want me to use it, he would remove this reason and logic part of my brain out and replace it with more faith. So, you know, and I was of the opinion, you know, as the saying goes, my grandmother didn't raise a fool. I'm no fool. You know, I said, I can't believe in this. You know, I mean, this book I've been taught is the inerrant word of God, and you're just telling me that it's a book of errors that's only perfect through faith. That's like me taking a 1982 Datsun all beat up and saying, if you believe, it can be a Mercedes. If you believe. You know, that would make no sense. You can't take a car to the car dealership and say that. No, if you really believe it, if you look at it right, it's a Mercedes. So I decided to start searching other religions. I went back to Judaism, I studied Judaism. I found the same thing that Jesus taught about two spiritual Jews that leave the law, and Jews that were so caught up in the law that they left no room for spirituality. I studied Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism, Wiccan, Bushido, you know, everything I could get my hands on, every type of ism or religion, I studied it. It was during this time that I did read one book about Islam in the public library, because I had never heard of Islam ever. But I remember I was looking in the religious section in the library at school, and there was a book about Islam, and or it was in the library, the public library, and I remember it was some title like "Why I'm Not a Muslim" or some, you know, one of these titles that was propagandistic against Islam, but I had no idea. So I just took the book and I read it, and I remember it said that Muslims, M-O-S-L-E-M-S, and any of you knowing Arabic knows that's a very derogatory word. A Muslim is someone who oppresses someone else. That's a very quick sleight of the pen that was used in the past for a very real purpose. It said that Muslims were people who worshipped a moon god named Allah, who lived in a box in the desert in Saudi Arabia, and they were oppressive to women. I remember there was a whole chapter about how they could have 4 wives and as many as they want, actually, because they could marry 2, divorce 1, get 3 more, you know, this whole, you know, and it said that, you know, I remember the one thing that really caught my attention was the whole chapter on jihad, where it said that Muslims were allowed to kill non-Muslims at any time, at any place, without discretion, and it was an honorable act, and not only would they go to heaven before it, but they would get 70 virgins on the way. You know, so I closed the book on Islam, put it back on the shelf, and marked off Islam off my little list of religions, and said thanks but no thanks, and if I ever see a Muslim, I am out. And I said I'm pretty safe in Greenville, South Carolina. I had never seen a Muslim ever. So I said, you know, I don't have to worry about running into no Muslims, thank God.
It's a very interesting discussion. I would have loved to have a longer discussion with you, probably on other occasions. But I want to ask you, now you've been traveling, the way you look, just
Yes.
the way you are. You've been traveling
Yeah.
in parts of the Muslim world. I met you once in Malaysia.
Yes.
You've been to Iran. You've been to Gaza also, and you
Yeah.
met Ismail
Thank
Haniya
God.
there.
Yeah.
how do people receive you? I mean, is it easy? Do you find it difficult?
Well, that's again part of the tragedy, the Nakba of Zionism, because we've enjoyed the hospitality, the friendship, the warmth of all the Muslim countries for hundreds of years. Jews have been thriving and flourishing, Jewish communities as very religious communities that upheld the Torah totally. There was no reform until today. Almost there was never reform or that type of concept in the Sephardic lands and Middle Eastern countries. So we were, and they, so even there was no United Nations or human rights groups. We were able to thrive and serve God because we followed to the letter of the law, the Torah. Zionism came along and tried, being that they had, let's say, the control, a lot of control of the media and the sole holding of the microphone in their hands. For over 50 years, they've been bombarding the world with a picture as if the Muslim people and the Arab lands have an ingrained hate to the Jews and that they're inhospitable. When the facts on the ground and history attest to the fact that they were our best friends, they were replaced by the Inquisition, by the Crusades, by World War II, that the Jews found a home and a safe haven in the Muslim.
But then when I saw Muslims bow and prostrate on the floor, verses and verses of every religious book that I had ever read started ringing off in my head, that this was the way men of God prayed. And the first thing that I could think of in my mind was, this is worship. That's what I said to myself. This is not prayer, because prayers are asking God for something. These people are worshiping God. So I said to myself that you've written this religion off way too easily. I thought I was a much more open-minded person than that, and I was ashamed of myself that I had written it off with just one little book. You know, I'd put all these studies into the other religions. I read this one thing about Islam and was done. So I went to the Imam after Jummah. You know, he talked to me, and I would have to say that I was probably a little bit rude with him. And I've asked him to forgive me. You know, I saw him a few years later. I said, you got to forgive me for the first time you saw me. Because he started telling me, you know, would you like to know a little bit more about, he had a very heavy accent. He was an Egyptian brother. Would you like to know a little bit more about Islam? He tried to give me some pamphlets. I said, no. I don't want any of this right here. I said, do you have a book? This is what I wanted to know. Do you have a book? Can you give me? He said, yes, we have a book. I said, it's called the Quran. I said, can I read it? Is it in English? Can I read it? He said, sure, you can read it. And then he tried to explain it to me a little bit, how it came by. I said, nah, just give me the book, because the book should speak for itself. So I took the Quran home, and on Friday night I started to read it, because this is a book I had never seen before. And I was very interested. Because when I saw the name Jesus first, that really intrigued me. I wanted to see, what does this book have to say about Jesus? And I read the story in Ali Imran, and I read a story in Surah Maryam. And it was more beautiful than anything I had ever read in the New Testament, or any nativity story that I had ever heard. It was more beautiful than that, times 10. I remember the only thing that I could capture my mind was the miracle of how, because in the Bible you never really figure out the conflict of how Mary gets over this finger pointing at her about her coming with a baby and she's not married. There's no real end to that. There's no real defense for her from this in the New Testament. But the Quran is so explicit and so clear that Jesus' first miracle was to speak from the womb, to speak as a baby and defend the honor of his mother, something that you cannot deny, something that you cannot deny about her, who Mary was, when you have this baby speaking on her behalf. So I would say I read the Quran entirely in 3 days. But that first night, after I had made it through Surah Al-Imran, my heart was already given to this book. I didn't know what it meant to be a Muslim. I didn't know how to be a Muslim. I didn't even know what that meant. But I knew that whoever it was that followed this book, I wanted to be like these people. I wanted to be like the people that I read about in this book. These were people I could follow. These were prophets. This was a book of guidance. And this was something that the book is calling and appealing to me. That if you don't believe in this book, you never see that. I've never seen this in any other scripture. The direct challenges that are in the Quran, that if you don't believe this book is true, put it to the test. Put it to the test. And this was something that was so astounding to me, that God is telling you over and over again, if you don't believe this is the truth, test it. Bring me something else like it. Test it. Put it to test. If it was written, if there was more than, I mean, all of the analogies about God, everything was so logical, so rational, so reasonable in my mind that it was like 2 + 2 = 4, and that was it. There was no 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, egg, yolk, water, fire. There was none of that foolishness. The Quran was very direct and very straightforward in its teachings. So I gave my heart to Islam that night in my living room, reading the Quran, and I cried and cried, that I had been looking for the truth all this time.